During the so-called Great War, the world experienced battles filled with destruction and violence. But the chaos of World War I was only the beginning of a new era filled with new military inventions that would change history forever. By the end of World War I, the Germans clearly realized that their old biplanes were obsolete. So, in 1930, new designs for new aircraft were conceived, and in 1935, the Messerschmitt Bf 109 flew for the first time. The top 3 German pilots achieved fame flying the Bf 109, including ace Erich Hartmann, credited with shooting down 352 Allied aircraft, including 345 Soviet and 7 United States Air Force aircraft. The Bf 109 continued to be updated throughout the war with new versions, remaining competitive even against the latest Allied fighters until the end of the conflict. In 1942, it began to be partially replaced by the new German fighter, the Fw-190, but continued to fulfill many functions on the Eastern Front. The versatility of the Bf 109 meant that it was used in various tasks: bomber escort, fighter-bomber, bombed ground targets, among them ground attack aircraft and reconnaissance aircraft. During World War II, the Axis forces developed several ground attack aircraft, which allowed them to destroy military installations and attack valuable enemy weapons and vehicle factories. The Junkers Ju-87 was one of the most feared aircraft of the war. It became known worldwide as the Stuka, a propaganda symbol of German air power and blitzkrieg victories between 1939 and 1942. The Stuka made its combat debut in 1937 in the Spanish Civil War, but did not become commonly used until 1939 in the invasion of Poland that started World War II. The main tactic used by the Stukas was to fly above the clouds until they got close enough to their targets. Then, they would quickly dive towards the ground to fly low and bomb their enemies with as much precision as possible. The Stukas were feared for their unpredictable and fast attacks. But these aircraft had another intimidating feature: the trumpets of Jericho, sirens installed on the landing gear that emitted a loud, ghostly sound during the aircraft's dives. With fewer resources than their allies, the Italian forces had the complicated task of developing a single-engine aircraft on par with the Allied and German fighters. This is how the Fiat G55 Centaur was born. It was designed and built in Turin by the renowned manufacturer Fiat. The G55 was clearly the best Italian fighter produced during World War II, receiving approval from German engineers, and even being considered superior to the Bf 109. During its short service, the G55 proved to be a powerful, robust, and fast aircraft, being an excellent interceptor at high altitudes. In 1944, in northern Italy, the G55 fought against the Supermarine Spitfire, P-51 Mustang, and the P-47 Thunderbolt, proving to be a match for its rivals. Despite its efficiency, only 300 G55s were built by the end of the war. While most countries were putting their efforts into developing aircraft with thicker armor and more powerful weapons, the Japanese surprised everyone with their light and maneuverable aircraft. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero was the main fighter of the Imperial Japanese Navy in World War II. It was the model used by Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, the greatest Japanese pilot of the war. The maneuverability of the Zero was impressive in battle. It could make unexpected turns and reach altitude with great ease. A skilled Japanese pilot could sometimes reverse course and get behind the pursuing aircraft. The lightness and maneuverability of the Zero was due to simple construction, with little or no armor for the pilot or the fuel tank. The aircraft was fragile and extremely vulnerable to enemy fire. The Zero also became very famous for being the primary aircraft used by the kamikazes, and is still considered today an incredible feat of engineering that marked the beginning of Japanese high-precision technology. The Nakajima B5N was a bomber and torpedo carrier used by the Imperial Japanese Navy. It was the main torpedo bomber in the Pacific War during World War II. The B5N was one of the main aircraft used in the attack on Pearl Harbor. About 150 of these aircraft hit the North American base with bombs and machine gun fire. In one of these aircraft was Mitsuo Fuchida, the commander of the Japanese attack. It played an important role in the sinking of the Japanese carriers USS Yorktown, USS Lexington, and USS Hornet from the US Navy, and also in the final periods of the war, where it was used in kamikaze attacks. The B5N was the basis for a subsequent design, the B6N, which eventually replaced it on the front lines. However, it did not play a relevant role in the war as it came along late. Unlike the Axis Forces aircraft, the US Air Force developed heavily armored and armed planes, such as the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. Its main armament contained 8 50 caliber machine guns, and it could be equipped with rockets or carry a bomb of up to 1,000 kilograms. When fully loaded, the P-47 weighed up to 8 tons, one of the heaviest of the war. The first combat mission of the P-47 took place on March 10, 1943. In the first skirmishes, the American aircraft proved to be quite efficient, especially against German Fw-190 fighters. Luftwaffe's Heinz Bär admitted that the P-47 could absorb an impressive amount of fire and keep fighting. The P-47 was primarily used as an escort plane for bombers. However, due to its weight, it could only operate at short to medium range. It was also used by air forces of other countries, such as France, the United Kingdom, the Soviet Union, and Brazil. With the increase in fuel capacity as the new versions were refined, the range of escort missions in Europe increased considerably. The P-47 became capable of accompanying bombers in the attacks that made their way into Germany. Another North American Air Force fighter also played an especially important role in World War II, the iconic P-51 Mustang. The P-51 was the answer found to effectively escort bombers. It used a reliable engine and had room for a larger than average fuel load. It was able to keep up with bombers leaving England for Germany while maintaining a good flying range. The P-51's positive prominence meant that it gradually replaced the P-47 Thunderbolt and the P-38 Lightning in bomber escort, as it flew at high altitudes, accompanying B-17 Boeing side by side on their missions. In early 1944, the pilots of the P-51s of the 8th Air Force were instructed to stop flying in formation with the bombers. Instead, they were to attack the Luftwaffe where it was identified. The goal was to achieve air supremacy. Groups of P-51s were sent far ahead of the bombers in a fighter sweep aimed at intercepting the attacking German fighters. Known as the Flying Fortress, the Boeing B-17 was a heavy bomber used in strategic attacks against German industrial, military, and civilian targets. It also participated in the Pacific War at the beginning of World War II, where it attacked Japanese ships and airfields. Its resilient reputation is based on stories and photos of severely damaged B-17s that made it safely back to base. Its performance in the conflict was enviable, being the US aircraft that dropped the most bombs in World War II. The final version was the B-17G, with 13 guns of different calibers throughout the aircraft, ensuring a considerable level of defensive options against enemy fighters. For their part, the British had the incredible Supermarine Spitfire, the best British fighter of the war, and possibly the aircraft produced in the greatest number by the British Air Force. During the war, many versions of the Spitfire were manufactured, which tested different wing layouts and armaments to achieve a short-range, high-performance interceptor aircraft. During battles, Spitfires were usually tasked to take on Luftwaffe fighters, especially the Bf-109 series aircraft, which were a close rival. Later versions of the Spitfire had 8 Browning machine guns, ensuring excellent firepower. Still, it could not defeat the Japanese Zero in a direct confrontation, making it necessary to create combat formations in confrontations in the Pacific. Loved by its pilots and admired by enthusiasts worldwide, the Spitfire fulfilled various roles including interception, reconnaissance, and fighter-bomber missions. continuing in that role until the 1950s. In October 1942, the Yakovlev Yak-9 went into operation, considered by many to be the best fighter made by the Soviet Union and the one responsible for ending the Luftwaffe's supremacy in the skies. The Yak-9 was produced between 1942 and 1948, with over 16,000 models built. The versatile Yak-9 had several types of armaments for anti-tank, light bomber, and long-range escort functions. At low altitude, where it predominantly operated, the Yak-9 had a maneuverability advantage against its enemy, the German Bf-109. The Yak-9K variant was equipped with a powerful 45mm cannon capable of destroying any enemy fighter with one clear shot. One of the best pilots of the Yak-9 was First Lieutenant Vybornov, who won 19 aerial victories and 9 shared. He was awarded the Gold Star Medal of Hero of the Soviet Union in June 1945. With the end of World War II, many fighter planes continued to be used in various countries, and many technological innovations developed during the war allowed the future of aviation in the world to be perfected.